Another method of evaluating limits is by looking at the graph of the function of f of x, or y equals f of x. Now, say for example, we have here f of x equals x minus 1. Now, if ang given sa ato is ang graph of the function, then we have example here, the graph of the function f of x equals x minus 1. And we are asked to look for the limit of f of x as x approaches 3. Ang atong buhaton, if given ang function, is to investigate that graph of the function and look at the behavior of the function, kung unsa ang gi-approach sa ato ang y as we move closer and closer to a particular x value. So, in this example, kung atong tanawon ang behavior sa atong graph, as we move closer and closer to 3, di ba kay 3 man daw atong i-approach. So, as narama tong 3 diri na 1, 2, 3. So, diri lang si 3. As we move closer and closer to 3 from both directions, atong tanawon kung unsa ang gi-approach nga value po sa atong y. So, if our value is 1, x value is 1, naraman diri. If atong value sa x kay 2, ang iyahang corresponding y value is this 1. Now, kung 2.5 o 2.5 dire, 2.5 atong i-approach kay kani siya. So, sa 3, kung 3 gud mismo, ang iyahang value is kani, dire siya. So, as we move closer and closer to 3, we are also moving closer and closer to this particular value. So, kung di punta sa pikas, from 5, man siya ang iyang corresponding y value kay kani. So, 4, yung corresponding y value is this 1. So, gaana po ta move closer and closer to this particular value. Yung ana lang ang pagtanaw nato sa graph sa function if graph ang given. And whatever value nga gi-approach sa imuhang y, as we move closer and closer to this particular x value, mo na siya ang limit sa atong function. So, unsa man ni siya nga value, kani atong gi-approach diri. This is 1, 2. So, the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 is equal to 2. So, tanaw na to if gamitan na to og table of values, kay na-discuss naman to ganina ang table of values, no? So, if we use table of values, so, sa itong table of values, gani, we list down values of x, and then we look for its corresponding y value. So, batag duha ka table na tay from the left side and right side. Muna sila ito mga gitawag nga one-sided limits. So, unsa man ang values approaching 3, kani, 3 man itong approach from the left. So, we have 2, we have 2.5, 2.9, 2.99, and ito pa yung ipadol, 2.999. So, dito din sa PCAS, we have 4. Pwede ka magsugod sa 4, no? Kaya we move closer to 3 man. Then 3.5, 3.1, 3.001, and then 3.0001. Nanubra ko isa, no? Sige na lang. So, let's substitute these x values and then look for its corresponding y value, or f of x. So, 2 minus 1 is 1. 2.5 minus 1 is 1.5. This is 1.9. This is 1.99 and 1.999. Here, this is 3. Then, we also have 2.5 here. Then 2.1, 2.001, and then 2.0001. Now, let's try to observe unsa day nga value atong gi-approach diri sa pikas nga side. Sa atong C negative, we are approaching 2. And diri sa pikas, we are also approaching 2. Since their one-sided limits are equal, parehas ang atong gi-approach from the left and from the right, then mo na siya nga ato ang limit sa function. Therefore, correct din ang ato ang pag-observe sa graph nga as we move closer and closer to 3, we are moving closer and closer to 2 sa atong x nga, or sa atong y nga variable. Therefore, the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 is equal to 2. So, mo to siya. There are ways or different ways in evaluating limits kay there are functions that dili applicable ang isa ka particular nga process. So that is why we have to know all of these methods para matrya nato and ma-compare nato kung parehas ba sila og result once we use one method and the other. So kung parehas na sila, then definitely makasure ka nga ang imo ang answer is correct. Like for this example, if we use or if we look at the graph of the function, then makuha nato or nakuha nato nga ang limit is 2. And if we use the previous method that we discussed, which is the table of values, after we listed down x values or the values that are approaching 3 from left and right, then ato ding ikuha ang iyahang corresponding y value. And by looking at the behavior of our y or our f of x, nakita nato nga it approaches 2. Therefore, mo na siya ang limit sa ato ang function. So, try to solve for this one, the limit of f of x as x approaches 2 by looking at the graph. Sige. Try to pause this video and try sa solve, then continue lang dayon if na kay answer and try to check whether your answer is correct or not. Okay, so ato na siyang isolve no. I hope that you already have your answers and tanaw na to if sakto ba inyo ang answer. So, muna siya ang graph daw sa atong function. So, as we move closer and closer to 2, kani siya from both directions naman si 2 diri no, from both directions as we move closer and closer to 2, atong function kay nag-approach og particular y value kana siya. Unsa man ang value? Mo man na siya natungod sa 2 no. So as we move closer and closer to 2, we move closer and closer to this particular value. So man na siya 1, 2, 3. So, atong limit di ay daw is 3. Tanaw na to if sakto ba ang answer nato nga 3. Sakto ba yung answer? 3 ba yung answer? Kung 3 yung answer, let's try to use another method. Para lang yun ma-double check if sakto ba ang atong answer. Let's use table of values. So, sa table of values, unsa ito, we have to list down x values and look for its corresponding y values. So, x and then f of x. Kani siyang other methods, kinahanglan gid nato siya mas mahibalan kay para natay way to check whether our answer is correct or not. Kay if dili gani magparehas, then probably na ay wrong nga nahitabo sa imong solution or na kay mistake nga na-commit. Pero if parehas gani na sila, then most likely your answer is correct. So as we move closer and closer to 2, unsa na siya nga mga values, we have 1, 1.5, 1.9, and then 1.99, 1.999. Diri pod, we have 2.5. So 3 sa tamang sugod. 3, 2.5, 2.1, 2.01, and 2.001. Okay, we move closer and closer to 2 man ta from both directions. So, pila man na si 1 squared minus 1. 1 squared minus 1 is 1 minus 1, 0. So, 1.5 squared minus 1. So, pila man ang 1.5 squared minus 1. Solve ta sa 1.5 squared minus 1. That is 1.25. So, 1.25. See, 1.9 squared na punta. 1.9 squared minus 1. We have 2.61. Then, 1.99 squared minus 1. 2.9601. 2.9601. And then, last 1.999 squared minus 1. We have 2.996001. 2.996001. So dito sa pikas nga side, we have 3 squared, which is 9 minus 1 natay 8. 8. Dito sa pikas nga side, 2.5 squared minus 1 is 21.4, and that is 5.25. 5.25, 2.1 squared minus 1, pila mo siya, 3.41, and then 2.01 squared minus 1, 3.0401, 01. So kanin siya is probably 0.001. Ito lang i-check karon. Sure. Sakto. 004, 001. So, unsa man nga value ang atong gi-approach from this side? 3. Here, we approach 3. Since we are approaching the same value from both directions or sa atong one-sided limits, then we conclude that our limit is 3. Okay? So, itong rule that we have to remember, limit exists if and only if the one-sided limits are equal. And kung unsa gani na siya nga value ang gi-approach sa imong one-sided limits, or unsa nang limits sa imong mga one-sided limits, mo na siya nga atong limit sa function nga gihatag sa atoa. So, sakto ba yung answer? I hope you got it correctly. Let's try to have another example, and this time let's have a piecewise function which states that the f of x is equal to x minus 1 if x is less than 3 and x plus 1 if x is greater than or equal to 3. So, kung ato na siya i-graph, nga niyang tsura. Now, if we use table of values, makita nato gyapon ang ihang difference. No, klaro man kaayo nga, there is a difference sa gina-approach sa imuhang y as your x approach a particular value. So, kung atong gamitan na siya table of values, kabayo naman po mo saan paggamit, makita ninyo nga dili parehas gid ang gina-approach sa imuhang y or sa imuhang f of x. Now, by simply looking at the graph of the function, kung given ang graph, klaro kaayo that as we move closer and closer to 3, okay, for example, we are asked to solve for the limit of f of x as x approaches 3. As we move closer and closer to 3, so kung dili ta nga direction, we are approaching kaning nga value. But if we are from this direction, kay kani man si 3, we are approaching this value. So, unsa man nga value nga gi-approach nato from this side? Sa ato ang c negative ni the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 negative kay pila? 1, 2. So, 2 na siya. Diri nga side sa pikas, limit of f of x as x approaches 3 positive kay pila man ni? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, since our one-sided limits are not equal, kay 2 man ang i-approach sa left, then sa right kay 4. So, since they are not equal, unsa kay itong rule nga itong gi-note ganina, limit exists if and only if the one-sided limits are equal. Now, this time, our one-sided limits are clearly not equal, 2 ug 4. Therefore, we can say that the limit does not exist. So, we say that the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 d and e. Now, I want to emphasize nga dili ta magbutang og equal sign diri nga part, no? Dili ta mag-ingon nga limit of f of x as x approaches 3 equals d and e. Since d and e is not a value, this is simply a symbol or a placeholder or annotation nga the limit does not exist. So, dili ta magbutang og equal sign since this is not a value.